Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. We're going to go and delve into a bit of history in today's show because history is what makes us who we are. Although a lot of the history that we have been told in recent years, or you sat there as a child in your history lesson at school as I did, we're now beginning to realise this is not quite the story that actually happened. And of course, history is always written by the victors, they told. And if you take the word of history, we know it's his story. This is something that's all relatively new to me and I find absolutely fascinating. So when one of my viewers said to me, Richard, you really got to get this lady on who has been delving into history and will really open your eyes, I thought I would be very interested. And I got in touch with the lady and she sent me her book, which is called The Great Migrations to Britain, 1527 BC and 485 BC. Marchell Abrahams is her name, and she is a scholar, and she joins me now. Hello, Marcel.
Marchell.
Marchell.
It's all right. Yeah. Hello, Richard, and thank you very much for having me on. Yes,
It's an
and thank you
absolute
to the
pleasure.
unknown person who suggested me, because this is a fantastic opportunity to get our suppressed British history slightly better known and out into the public view where it belongs.
And this is, I mean, and this is the interesting thing because people have been, and there's so many uh, um, lies, deceptions, and all sorts of stuff about who we are. And so let's just, I mean, it's something that I know that's passionate to you, having spoken to you just before we started recording. Unless you know something about your own history, and I'm not talking about your own personal history, but where you come from,
Yes.
you can't really look to the future because it means something to you.
It's very true. And I think also we have, I certainly did, and that so must other people have felt things were right, but we didn't know why they were right. And then there were other things that were wrong, but we didn't know why they were wrong. And this feeling has stayed with me since girlhood. And as I said in that précis I sent you, I started investigating when I first read The Holy Kingdom by Adrian Gilbert and Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett, and that was an eye opener for me. And I realized that there's a whole chunk of our national identity pre-Saxon about which we knew absolutely nothing. We were taught nothing. It's not in the history books. It's you can't go into a library and ask for it. So I began investigating, and never mind a rabbit hole, it's a warren down there.
Mm.
And yes, this book, The Great Migrations, is the result. And thank you.
And it's no, it's great, and we'll put links in at the end where people can buy it and follow your journey and the journey of the migrations, of course. And you very kindly sent it to me. Now, I know one of the things that you, I suppose, specialise in is etymology,
Yes,
and in recent times we've been looking at the words that we use and what they might mean and their I can't even say the word. You see,
derivations.
derivations.
That's
Thank
him.
you very
Yes.
much. And so reading the book, and of course I don't get a huge amount of time because of all the videos and various things and travelling about. But reading the book, the etymology of the words is very much the sort of the crumbs that take you back
Yes,
to what's going
absolutely.
on.
Yeah, they really are the clue through the labyrinth. And I had no idea when I started being interested in etymology. In fact, my father taught me the rudiments of etymology when I was about 8. He started teaching me where words come from and how to break up a word into its root and its suffix and its prefix and everything. And I just basically enlarged upon that. And I started making connections between words. And it was a roller coaster of new experiences, new whole new avenues. The classics, the Greek classics came into it, and I use Welsh, and I know this will make some of your viewers raise an eyebrow or two, but Welsh is the oldest unchanged language in Europe. It's much older than Latin, and English, and this is going to make my Welsh friends scratch their heads a bit, but English is even older than Welsh. And so I use Welsh as a key to unlock the true meaning of the English words. And I've actually been brazen enough to dub this, give it a name of its own. And I've dubbed it archaeography because it's a form of armchair archaeology, but I'm not actually digging through the soil. I'm digging through the accretions of hundreds of years to find the true meanings of words and their connections.
Mm.
For example, and I always use this example mainly because it's the only one I can remember. I have a memory of a sieve. I have to write everything down, then I forget it. If you take the word inch and ounce, on the surface of it, they don't look as though they're related at all. And inch is a 12th part of a foot, as we know, but ounce is a 16th. So yeah, how are they connected? Well, we used to have the troy pound, which had still has 12 troy ounces in it, so that's the 12th part. Um,
And
they
they measure silver. Measure silver in troy
Yes, the
ounces, don't
silver
they?
and
Yeah,
gold, precious
yeah,
metals,
yeah.
absolutely. And wheat is still measured in bushels, which is for an old reactionary like me who doesn't like the metric system being foisted on us without democratic mandate. Um, this is very encouraging. Yes, bother. I'm sorry, I've lost the.
No, that's right. Inches and
Oh,
ounces.
yes, yes, inch and
Yes.
ounce. Yes, I see. Hopeless memory. Inch and ounce. They're said to come from Latin. They don't come from Latin at all. They're related to Latin, and they actually stem from the word that is behind the word one, um, and it is a circle of 12.
Right. Oh,
So,
right.
but if you go to conventional etymology, you won't find inch or ounce taken any further back than, what you might call two surface meanings. But I managed to plunge right back down, and they're both related to one, but with a sense of 12 parts. So this is where it comes from. This is
Yes,
where it comes from.
I mean, just on that, just without going down other rabbit holes, it's fascinating how those old measurements related to the real world,
Yes,
as
yes,
opposed
yes.
to, and you mentioned metric that's been foisted on us, and I remember that coming in, which seems to have no relevance to the real world,
Because it doesn't, it's completely made up. It was invented by Talleyrand. I got all this information from the late Vivian Lineker, who ran the British Weights and Measures Association. I've been a member of them for years. And I owe Vivian Lineker a good deal. He wrote, what was it called? The Golden Rule or something like that. Marvelous book. But I learned a lot about this sort of thing from him, and yeah, so I'll try and find the title of the book.
yes. So anyway, and so much does in the past relate to the real world, and as we've alluded to, everything's a bit made up and a bit strange, and
Yes.
is a sort of artificial world that we're swimming in. So let's go back
Oh, yes,
um,
yes, it
in
is.
in time to the Great Migrations to Britain, and you talk about two people here that are related in one way, and I'm sure you're going to explain that. You've got Brutus and
Yes.
is it Albine? Is that how you
Albine.
pronounce
Yes,
Albine?
yes, yes.
So now
Um,
Albine was earlier than Brutus, if I've got that
yes,
correct.
yes.
So,
She was 16th century BC, and I do hope to goodness I've got that the right way around. I have no head for numbers. Words are my thing. Numbers. I love numbers, but they don't love me. And in the Great Migrations, I demonstrate that there is a long forgotten but very very deeply buried connection between Sumer and Britain, and the midpoint is Delphi. That's all. It's all in the book, and whether it was, we don't know why she brought her people from Sumer. It was probably connected with the Santorini explosion. The latest evidence shows that that was very close to her migration. And the thing about Albine is that she actually appears under a slightly different name, Albion, in Holinshed's Chronicles. And I was able, with that and a few known dates from the Welsh genealogies, as I said in the précis, I used that as a skeleton to hang the story of Brutus and Albine on. Um, she was a Sumerian princess, and she brought her people overland. And this is all attested to by the alphabets that people have found, particularly building on Wilson and Blackett's what they call their alphabet trail. The Etruscan alphabet is so simple, so similar. The Eurasian alphabet, and the what you might call the, do I mean demographic? No, anthropological evidence, bringing her all the way from Sumer back to Britain. Um,
Do we know why she came here, of all places? And what was it like when she came here?
it's difficult to say because I am not that sort of historian, so I can't point to what life was like in Britain. But again, for me, if the words take me to places, and I do the research when I get there. I am an amateur and proud of it. So I didn't go to university or anything. I have
Right,
um, uh, uh, two A levels, one of which was a retake. But I happen to have a knack for spotting the connections in things, and it's led me on this incredible journey
right.
across time.
And
And
it's. I'm just going to stop you there because I just want to emphasise when you said that you're an amateur. I think this now is a badge of
oh, I agree. Of
being
honor,
good,
yes,
of honour, because
yes,
we
because
used
I've
to have
no
these.
axe to grind, and I'm not
Exactly.
being paid by university. I'm employing a talent which the good God gave me, in an area which is utterly underrepresented, and met some fantastic people along the way, particularly in South Wales, and
But
so
it is
yes,
interesting. A lot of people go, "Oh, an amateur." But I was just thinking, we used to have, back in time, we used to have people who were enthusiastic and they
yes,
were amateurs and they would
yes,
just go and they had a passion and they
yes,
found out things. And then university started to mold people,
yes,
and
yes.
a lot of the history books that we see on our shelves now have been from that sort of era. And I know you referenced an old book that you have had, and I'm guessing that he was also an amateur in the field and passionate. And
This fellow, can I hold that up, please?
yes, that's it. Yeah, the history
Um,
of institutions. Reverend R.W. Morgan, it
yeah,
says.
what a cracking historian he's. And this is just a digest. Um, and the other fellow is this man. So
Oh yes, L.A. Waddle.
Waddle, yes, the British Edda. Now everybody thinks the Edda is Icelandic, and it isn't. It's Old British.
Oh right.
The yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail here because I don't want to put people off.
No,
But there is this the tales of our history as written by, oh gosh, I had to show another book now. This is Percy Enderby, Cambria Triumphans.
okay.
Now he wrote this history during the Commonwealth and presented it to King Charles II in 1661. When I tried to find a copy of this through the British Library, they didn't know anything about it, and then I was able to buy it in facsimile from a publisher in New Delhi, which is amazing. But these were all dropped. Our British histories, which are fundamentally true, of course, there are many inaccuracies in them because we are, as a nation, are fantastically ancient. We're far older than the Saxons, far older than Brutus. And The British histories were dropped when the Hanoverians came to the throne in 1714 because they were not descended from Trojans. We are. The Romans are descended from Trojans, the Etruscans are descended from Trojans, and so are we British. And the British histories were dropped because the Hanoverians were not descended from Trojans, and it was seen to be embarrassing for them. And gradually, it became expedient for vested interests um, for us not to remember who we really were. So forgetfulness turned into, in the mid-Victorian period, outright suppression.
Yes.
If you've got any Welsh viewers, they'll be able to tell you far better than I can what having your language suppressed, your culture suppressed, or we know what it's like now. Um, but it was outright suppression of us, our histories as a nation and as a very ancient people. And what I found was that fundamentally, the British histories are the true story, and the what we've been told ever since 1714 is only a slant of the truth, and sometimes not even that.
You mentioned in the précis that you sent me beforehand that very often archaeologists will go out, they'll dig something up, they won't really have much of a clue of its real age, or they'll have a vague idea, and they'll just say, well, it's Roman, or it's Roma,
Yes,
it's
Norman.
yes,
Yeah.
or Norman, or something like that. And you just then mentioned that we're far older than Romans and things,
Yes.
and you know the history that I've been sold, if you like, is that you've got your Neolithics. You go through the different ages, the Bronze Age, and all of those, and then pops up the Saxons. We go through the sort of Dark Ages and Middle Ages and what have you, and of course we've got the Normans, 1066, and then everything is sort of fairly easily
Quite easy
tied to.
going after that, yes.
Yes.
But what a lot of people don't know is that there was a massive comet strike in this country in about 560 AD. The exact uh, date hasn't yet been determined because guess what? No studies have been done. Um, the reason we know it happened is because, again, it's in the British histories. It's mentioned in one or two of the Welsh genealogies, all of which Wilson and Blackett used for their books. Um, and that this comet strike, on its trajectory, once it had blasted a path across the British Isles from the northeast, Aberdeenshire, down to Devon, Dorset, that way, cutting a stripe of damage and destruction right the way down the country. The trajectory took it on round to Bolivia and flattened an amazing site called Pumapunku, which I'm sure many of your viewers will know about. Needless to say, there are archaeologists swarming all over Pumapunku, but there are no archaeologists looking into the damage that was done in this country. Two questions. Where do the vitrified forts come from? And it's no good saying that people set fire to them to make the stones harder. That's tosh. You have to have a quite fantastic heat to melt stone. And goodness knows, I'm no scientist. Um, and the other question is, why do we not have any Roman remains or very few Roman remains above ground level? Because of this comet strike.
Right. Oh, that now I know that John Hamer had mentioned this in his book, The Falsification of History, which I read, which was
Yeah.
the first time I'd heard
Yes.
of this comet strike and the devastation and all of that.
Yeah.
But that's the first time I've heard about the question about why don't we see so much of the Roman
Yes.
remains
But
above
that's just
ground?
me as an amateur
Yeah. But
layman.
it's a great question.
Well, yeah, but these are the questions we need. We talked before we started recording, we talked about asking silly questions. And so often the silly question is the one question that needs to be asked and that nobody's asking. So
Yes.
please go and ask silly questions because A, the academics can't answer because they're so busy being clever. And if that makes me sound, I don't mean to be spiteful, but it's the truth. They're arguing the toss, especially with linguistics. They're arguing the toss between two leaves on the same tree. This leaf is different from that leaf. Well, what does it matter? It's the crown of one tree. And
Exactly.
my sort of linguistics doesn't deal with the leaves on top of the crown. I'm not interested in that. I want to take it back to the roots and see what soil it stands in. And that's what I've tried to do with the Great Migrations.
Yes. So let's
Um,
go. Let's go back to Albine then, because we took a slight
oh, sorry.
variance on. No, no, no. I think it's great because I mean, one of the things, the whole point of these shows is to question things and have an open mind to certain things. But let's go back to the sort of main story, if you like, the narrative. So
Yes.
Albine comes from Sumeria, which
Yes.
I know very little about, and then is over here, and I think as in Brutus, you plot the journey
Yes.
and you show all of that, which presumably must have taken a bit of time to work out using.
It did take quite a bit of time to work out, but I was building on Wilson and Blackett's work.
Just who were Will? Because you mentioned them several times, and some people
Yes.
may not have heard of them. So are they still around, or are they historical?
No, alas, Alan Wilson was a Welsh bard with a working background, the memory of a herd of elephants, an astonishing man in the true Welsh tradition. Baron Blackett was his invaluable helper. Alas, they're both dead now. But between them and with Adrian Gilbert, and here she goes again because I've got to reach for my bookcase. Sorry, I should have done this before we started.
No, not at
He
all.
wrote
It's
this
great.
book, The Holy
Holy
Kingdom.
Kingdom. Adrian Gilbert.
Yes.
Wow.
And I'm in touch with Adrian Gilbert, which is another huge treat for me because this book has been a Bible to me. Um, uh, they wrote several books about our true British history at a time when the opposition to who we really are was stronger than it is even. I mean, it looks very strong now, and indeed it is, but to me, it's crumbling at the seams. This system that we're living under hasn't got long to
Yes.
live. In the
No.
80s, when Wilson and Blackett were doing their research and trying to interest, for example, Cardiff University in understanding that there were actually two King Arthurs. There was Arthur the First, who came from Warwickshire and has been mixed up with Guy of Warwick. The exploits are the same, the battles are the same, the fields of operation on the continent, the theatres of war are the same. It's just you've got two names for one man. This is a theme that turns up over and over and over again. Um,
Which shouldn't really surprise us, seeing as we've had several Charleses and several
Exactly. I mean,
Henrys.
in the book, I say, well, the king is known. He's Duke of Rothesay. He was Prince of Wales. He's the king. He's several names for one man, and so they wrote several books about our British history on their own, which were republished by somebody who became a great friend of ours called Ross Broadstock, who alas has also died. And I hope the three of them are up there turning everything round the right way because my goodness, we need the help at the moment.
Yes.
But that's who Wilson and Blackett were. They're only just historical because Tony Blackett, Baron Blackett, only died last year.
Oh, that's a shame. But then, no, I mean, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to these people who are doing
Yes,
exactly
yes,
this,
yes.
because otherwise our knowledge would be just absolutely bereft of
Well, there's a
truth.
mass of wonderful people I'm involved with. Ross started up the Britain's Hidden History channel, and I'd love to give you the link for that because since he died, he was a huge character. The Great Migrations is dedicated to him. He became a great friend, he and his family. There's a great many people, just to name a few, Bob Morgan, Hugh Evans, um, Peter Chesborough, John Griffiths, and his son Adam, who are quietly working behind the scenes to bring back, for example, the fact that the star there are star maps on the ground, and I think you know a bit about this, don't you? Star maps on the ground that reflect the constellations.
Yes.
It's like Thornborough circles in Yorkshire, which are Orion's belt on the ground, just like the pyramids of Giza. Only they're they're circles rather than these massive pyramids. And there's so many other people who are unsung, who are working to bring back this amazing topographical, historical, linguistical evidence of our true British origins. And it all hangs together in the most astonishing fashion. I kept expecting to find it would all fall apart and I'd have to go and take up knitting or gardening or something. And it didn't fall apart and it all carried on hanging together. Where I got really excited was when I started redoing the chronologies because the chronologies are dreadfully tangled. And I think this is part of what the damage that was done to this country when the comet struck, because you'll probably know that there's a thing called folk memory, which isn't the same as our individual memories, but it's our consciousness of who we were, um, the fitness of things, where we belong as a people, where we're comfortable. That's all part of folk memory. And when the comet struck, this ripped away a part of the land, and it ripped away a part of our folk identity. Folk's the wrong word here, our national consciousness. And so it did a sort of like a far break between the two sides of the country, leaving us actually unable to make contact with each other. So we've gone limping on ever since, over the last, whatever millennium and a half.
Yes.
This damage, okay, it's grown over now, but the damage was done, and it still exists, or has existed up until recently, in our national memory. It looks as though, with the work that's being done in all sorts of areas to liberate our country, not just us but others as well, the work that people like Gary Lawrence and Mark Sexton are doing, the work that Tommy Robinson is doing. And wasn't that March on the 1st an absolute joy? Oh
Yes.
my goodness. No violence. And if somebody rang the BBC to say they didn't look far right to me, they look like perfectly normal British people, which is what we are, fed
Yes.
up with being suppressed and sat on. And I'm so proud to be a part of this movement. That's all we can call it.
Yes, absolutely. Do we know how wide the? I'm just coming back to the comet, because when you said that it sort of had two sides to it, and I was thinking, how wide was it to have devastated so much Roman evidence as well?
Well, I honestly don't know.
I mean, it could have been pretty much the same width of England in some respects.
I don't think it did wholesale damage, because we still have the so-called Roman walls partially standing in London,
Right.
which of course are not Roman at all. What they call the Roman roads were, sorry, Roman walls were actually re-erected by the Empress Helena in 320, 200, whenever she was.
Yes.
I'm supposed to be writing a biography about her, but my brains are spinning with
So much. Well, this is it.
I expect Brutus will turn up in the Helena biography, and I really will have to go and take up gardening as a rescue. So yes, we don't know how wide, and really all I've done with the Great Migrations is to cobble back together the garment that was our once well-known British history. I've found fragments here, fragments there. It's been a work of restoration, but there are huge gaps. There are huge historical gaps. We need to marry the history, the British histories, to the archaeological evidence that we do have, which is probably woefully wrongly attributed. We need a friendly geologist, a team of geologists, to go and start looking for just that evidence that you mentioned. How wide was the comet gap? I have no idea.
Yes, because I mean, otherwise we're just sitting there quite smugly, thinking we've got it all sewn up and
Yeah.
it's all in the books. And
Yeah.
and what else would you do? You know, there's no more work for archaeologists or historians, because
God.
we know it all.
Yeah.
But and I think we're finding out in many different areas that actually, like with health, we've been taken down one road and told little white pills are the answer, and science has been the
yes,
great thing. And
yes,
we're beginning to go, hang on a second, science, what about that woman a couple of hundred years ago, the wise woman
yes,
who was curing people left, right and centre with what was around locally,
yes,
just growing what we
absolutely.
call weeds.
Yes, it's like wormwood can cure cancer. Bicarbonate of soda can cure cancer. Even
Well, we're not
common cancers
officially,
like
we're not allowed to
leukemia.
say that
Oh, cure
on
is the
this
wrong word.
channel,
Okay, put
because
a bleep over that word. But
we're not allowed to. It's a
no, I'm
claim.
sorry. I
It
hope
is
I haven't
no,
dropped
no,
you in it.
no. Don't worry. It is a. I'm just clarifying for the algorithm, because hopefully that's making sense of it. It's a claim that has been made, and of course,
Yes,
as we all know, he says there's no it hasn't been passed by the FDA or the various medical things to say it's true.
Yes,
But people can make up their own mind if
indeed.
these
Yes,
things have been
yes, yes.
helpful. Let's just put it like that.
Another way of knowing things than just through the conscious mind, and that is our gut brain. And if your gut is in healthy working order, then so is its mind. It's the animal mind. Animals know how to medicate themselves.
Yes,
So actually do we, only we've forgotten how to make this contact between what we need as a body, a
yes,
human body, and what that body's requirements are.
absolutely. You don't see many animals, if at all, actually on their own volition queuing up to see the vet.
Precisely, you don't, because they know
They
what
know how to
plant to
do
go
it.
and eat. If they're
Yes.
feeling off color, they'll know what's wrong with them instinctively. They won't know in their brains, but
No.
they know instinctively what's wrong, and they will go to the right plant to eat. And
Yes.
you are so right. We could do with much more of that approach. Indeed, we
And sadly, if they are getting ill, it's much more likely to be the intervention that we humans, or at least some of us humans, the
yes.
not so nice ones, have put into their food or are spraying on the
Oh,
damn planet at the moment. Let's go back. Let's go. I'm trying to keep us back on track because I'm sure we could
there's such a
we
lot to
could
talk
talk.
about. I'm
Well,
sorry, I'm
isn't
such
there?
a waffler.
No, no, that's the whole point of being on here because I think we're painting a picture about history in general and how it's been changed,
Yeah.
and then more specifically. So tell me a little bit about Brutus. I know nothing about him prior to your book. So I mean, he's not the Brutus that we hear in. Is he the Brutus that we hear in Caesar? Who says
No,
"Et tu,
no,
Brutus"?
he's not. No, he's not. But the historical Brutus that I write about, who was not 12th century BC, he was later than that. The British histories, for all sorts of reasons, have got that chronology wrong, and they wrongly attribute his exploits to others. But um, he was 5th century BC. Well, he was born in about 550. He was a Roman consul. This is Nennius, who was a British historian of about 1200 years ago. Um, he his uncle was the last Etruscan king of Rome, and Brutus deposed him and became, with Collatinus, the first two co-consuls. That's a very interesting thing because the two co-consuls actually preserve the British and also Spartan idea of twin kingship, which again I go into in the book. It's the sun and moon thing. One can't rule without the other. Gold and silver belong together, sun and moon. Intuition and reason, this is the twin source of the twin kingship. So there they are, co-consuls. Um, and meanwhile, in Britain, there is a dreadful civil war raging because the old king has died and left the throne to his two sons. I'll give the Welsh name because I don't know how to pronounce the Anglicisation. The Welsh name of the old king is Gorfod, 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 and he has twin sons, Fer and Por, or Ferrex and Porrex, as the English British histories call them. They are fighting for the British throne, and there's a
Fighting each other.
fighting each other, yes.
Right.
Not putting the country first. Where have we heard that before? The whole country is descending into anarchy and rebellion. Brutus, on the other hand, is adrift in the Aegean, gathering bands of Trojan refugees into an army. He is a lineal descendant of King Lear, who, yes, actually existed.
King Lear.
Yes, actually existed. Um, and he is the old line that's on the British throne dies out. The British people say we don't want your line, Fur and Paw. You can just get out. We don't care what happens to you. Your line comes to an end. They summon Brutus, who's of a younger line. He's descended from Regan, Lear's daughter Regan. Cordelia has no children. The elder line, the senior line, is Goneril's or Coronilla, as her Coronil is her proper Welsh name. And Brutus is summoned to this country to quell the civil war, which he does to such effect that he becomes sovereign paramount over the three nations of Britain, which are Cymru. which is Wales and used to stretch over the whole of the north of England, Lloegr, which is England now, um, and the Welsh still call England Lloegr to this day, and Alban, which is Scotland. So you've got the three nations of Britain. Not quite sure what's happening in Ireland at this time. I'm looking into that as well. So there's Brutus.
Interesting that the people deposed the twins and
Yes,
then called for Bruce,
yes.
and you can't help feeling that that would be rather helpful these days, and not
Would it
very
not be
people are.
very helpful? Yes. However, there are plenty of fine fighting men in this country who will come to our aid. I'm sure when push comes to shove, which
Yes,
very soon is. So there's Brutus. He's married again. He executed his sons from his first marriage um, for taking part in a rebellion, and he's married again, and he has a young family. He's by this time, by the time he gets to this country, he's about 65, but still vigorous,
right.
and reigns for another 25 years. He is the lineal descendant of Lear, who is the lineal descendant of Albine, and this is all in Holinshed's King List, upon which I was able to hang the revised chronologies and everything. I do not pretend to have the answers to all this. This is a very basic foundation, a cobbling back together and a cleaning up of what happened.
Yes,
And the really interesting thing is that I was able to replace Brutus chronologically in his right time, because that's where he turns up in the Welsh genealogies. That's where he turns up in the Roman records, Livy. At the moment a man disappears from one set of records in one country, and a man with maybe a different name, but with the same set of attributes, turns up in another country at the same time. At this distance in time, you can be pretty certain you're talking about the same man.
yeah, no, interesting.
Um, there he is. He deposes his uncle, who Tarquin the Cruel, or Tarquin the Proud, they called him. He deposes his uncle, and he's a consul for a year, and which is all in the Roman records, and it's in the British records as well. He turns up in this country about 25 years later, once the Civil War is raging, and he's gathered his band of Trojans. It takes time to do this sort of thing. Um, he turns up in the British genealogies as Bruth, Brwth, which is the Welsh spelling of Brutus, and he's called Bruth the Warlike, and warlike he really is. And
Wow.
I can't, modern science and modern academia are exasperating because they require to have everything solidly proved. They seem to be incapable of accepting that at this distance in time, I can't provide that sort of proof, but I can provide from the words and from examination of the names of these people. I have, I hope, provided rather more than circumstantial evidence to support the British histories.
Yes.
I'm aware that there are many faults and failings in this book. Ross Broadstock was going to edit it for me. Sad to say, he died. I had to do it myself, and I'm not really an editor. Excuse me, I'm not really an editor. I've done the best I can. There are mistakes in it which I cringe over, but I was desperate to get the work out because the premise of it is right and proper, and answers so many questions. Some people have been very kind to leave reviews on my website, and more than one of them have said to me, "This answers so many questions. It fills so many gaps." But there are many, many more gaps out there, as I've said. And my goodness me, we need to get people behind this movement, this British history movement, to start filling in those gaps. I can't
Yes.
do it. I don't have the that's not my speciality, filling in those gaps. I can't go and pick an archaeological gap to fill or an historical gap to fill. I've just done what I can
But
with
I mean,
two
but
splendid people.
absolutely, and if we have a history in which there are these huge gaps that we are not looking at or not saying to people that these gaps even exist. If we saying, as I said before, we smugly think that we've got it all sorted
Yeah.
out and we
We
have this.
haven't. We've just been
Yeah.
looking, we've been picking away at islands, tiny little islands. And as I said in my précis, I hardly call it a discipline, but this study I've invented, archaeography, um, became a diving bell for me to plunge underwater, which is where most of our history is, to investigate the mountains, submerged mountain range that is our true British history, and lay it before the British public. But we do need we do need so many people to come and investigate these gaps and fill in the holes.
But I mean that in and of itself, it seems to me, is if it's uncharted territory, people love that sort of thing because they're discovering. You know,
Yes.
you're having to be creative. You're discovering. You're interpreting things. If you're just going over the old ground of, well, you know, nuances of Henry VIII's, you
Yes,
know,
yes, yes,
something,
yes.
it's a bit boring.
But it
What I was
requires,
fascinated.
sorry,
No, no. All I was going to say was that what I was fascinated is you mentioned in the little précis that you sent to me before we got going, how much things that we do know some of the names because they appear in nursery rhymes
yes,
and in myths, and we automatically just assume that's all made up nonsense.
yes.
But I think
But
we're
it
now
is,
beginning to realise that so much of that is based on real events. And
well,
we know, yeah, isn't it's true, isn't it? That
absolutely. But the fascinating thing about that, and I do go into it in not in huge detail because there wasn't room or time,
yes,
um, it has now been shown definitively that the fairy tales that we grew up with, the nursery, not so much the nursery rhymes, but the fairy tales that we grew up, Jack the Giant Killer, are actually about 5,000 years old, and they
wow,
come from Mesopotamia, where we come from.
right,
And
yes,
again, it's all in the Great Migrations. But uh, uh, when you start losing awareness of who you were, the information survives somehow, but it sinks down and it becomes myth, legend, fairy tale, nursery rhyme, and pretty stories to tell the children. And actually, that's where people need to be looking for the truth because
yes,
it's now become so submerged where we were in danger of losing it altogether. Thanks to the work of Wilson and Blackett, they resurrected a fantastic amount. For I talk about giants to stand on the shoulders of. I'm standing on the shoulders of those two, no mistake.
yes.
They did
I
not
mean,
have an easy time, and they didn't give other people an easy time. I mean, they. Yes, that's a whole other interview.
a whole other,
That story.
absolutely.
Yes,
But it's interesting you say giants. I mean, people have been sending me stuff about the skeletons that have been found and that they've buried the skeletons of these enormous people that once been here. And then you are reminded of things like Jack the Giant Killer,
yes.
and you think, oh yeah, because where else would these myths and legends come from
If
if
not
they
the
didn't?
truth. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, what we suffer from today is a really toxic combination of um, rationality that has turned into granite and a rampant and completely undisciplined and uninformed imagination. Now, the combination of those two things is a nightmare, and academics give rein to this. And it's all the wrong way round because what you need is an open mind which is resting firmly on a foundation of knowledge of your own history. And
Yes.
once you've got it that way round, then you've got a rock to stand on to go and do your exploring, not the other way round. The way academics think at the moment, it gives me the quivers. It really does. If you can keep
Yes.
thinking, peer
Absolutely.
review, indeed. I mean, do me a favor. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Oh, we can't say that because the funding will be cut off. What sort of way is that to be a scholar? It isn't.
No, quite.
Sorry, I'm
And
getting
that
quite excited about this.
no.
It does make me so angry. I can't bear the thought of knowledge, exploration, people's hard work. They put their life into this, sometimes their money, their savings, their time, as you do with exposing the appalling corruption that is prevalent today. this is an investment of us ourselves in our national identity, and I don't want to be confined by some piddling little academic at a former polytechnic who thinks he knows more than I'm prepared to put my time into finding out. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else.
No.
None of us are. We just, each of us seem to have a talent and a path through life. And I'm going to follow mine until somebody puts me in a bin, which
Well,
everybody else
I'm
is.
sure they certainly won't be putting you in a bin, but you can see how this is reflected not just in history, but in anything to do with the sort of the academic way of we've seen how we're the problems that we're in at the moment, a
Yeah.
lot of it, and the policies that we're seeing globally have been manufactured out of a theory,
Yes.
which is only a
Yes.
theory of man-made global warming. And so then you can see how academia and the funding and all of these things that if you want to actually pay your bills and have a reasonable life, you've got to follow this narrative.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and if you're prepared to take the slings and arrows and things that are being thrown at you and do it in your own time, you might be brave enough to say, well, I'd like to question it. I'd just like to
Yes,
question.
just why. My father taught me always ask why. It'll make you very unpopular, but that can't be helped. So yes, I've always asked why, and yes, it has made me unpopular. It's frightfully funny. I've been banned from editing Wikipedia. The first and only time I've ever tried to edit anything on Wikipedia. I was told that I was a repeat offender from 10 years ago, and I was banned until 2040 or something. I don't know the exact date. That made me hoot with laughter. Only tried once.
Only try a banned offender from
Yeah,
some.
I'm a repeat offender, and
Good
that's another
gracious.
badge of pride.
Yes. Well, anybody who really takes Wikipedia very seriously is obviously.
Well, I have to say I do use it because what it is really good at is gathering um, data. I won't call them facts, I'll call them data. It's really good
Right.
at gathering data. And if you know how to use that and interpret it properly, Wikipedia can be a great help. The moment you start going with their interpretations, you might as well pack it up
Yes.
and do something else because that's a joke.
Yes. No.
They're
Okay.
good data gatherers.
Good data gatherers. There you go. So just coming back to Brutus
Yes.
and Albine. Let's finish off with Albine. What did she do for the British nation once she'd come from Sumeria? Did she take us on a tangent, a journey, or is it that?
That is far more difficult to establish than I would like, because it is 3,500 years ago.
Yes,
Um,
I
that
just expected you to know.
No, I wish I did, but
Because you're the boffin and I'm not.
I think, shown evidence enough that she did come here. There's evidence from her deity. There's evidence from the mix-up or the how can I put it? The combination of her migration with Abrahams, which happened at the same time, can happily. Or coincidentally rather, which is nonsense. The idea that there should be two such mass migrations from the same place at the same time is a joke. So this is what I mean. You get two names for the same thing, two or three names for the same person. So you have to slightly put the names aside and look at the events, the timing, the geological phenomena like Santorini, and uh, um, uh, not extrapolate. I don't like extrapolating, but make progress from there. I can't answer that question. I
Right,
don't really know. This is another area where we need to be looking into Bronze Age burial sites. I don't even know where she's buried.
right.
There is enough linguistical evidence to show that she did come here, and not just from the language, but from the place names, from the worship, the fact that everywhere in this country you find the two eyes, like home next to sea, home one, home two, which is off the coast of North Norfolk. Um, Sumeria was called the land of the Watchers, and everywhere where Albine came, there is evidence of these eyes, like
Carved,
Stonehenge in
carved.
Avebury, for example,
Right.
two
Oh,
eyes.
okay. And when they came, either Brutus or Albine, they're obviously not coming on their own. They're bringing a
Vast
huge
numbers of
number of
people.
vast
Yes,
numbers of
yes.
people.
Brutus came by sea, and his sea journey is in Geoffrey of Monmouth. I know everybody roars with laughter at Geoffrey of Monmouth. He was a translator. He was not an historian. He was a monk commissioned to translate a very old Welsh book. There are some really interesting people. Bother, can't forget the name. I can't remember the name on academia who are actually beginning to take the works of Gildas Nennius, who are two of our historians, seriously, and they're trying to correlate, much as I did, correlate the events and revise the chronologies. The chronologies are a mess, that is undoubted. I mean, I only had about three firm dates to hang the whole thing on, but I also had the King list, Holinshead's King list, which is the main skeleton of the whole thing. Um, so oh gosh, I really have gone off at a tangent this time.
Yes, I
But
was just talking about the numbers,
call me in.
the numbers of people that came
Yes,
with them, yeah, you said Brutus came by sea.
yes, and
Uh,
Alban came over land. Um, this that her overland migration is attested by, as I said before, the alphabets, all of which, and this is going to make some of your more conventionally minded viewers draws drop, because we are taught that Colbren, the Welsh alphabet, was created by an opium addict called Iolo Morganwg. Well, it wasn't. The Welsh alphabet, Colbren, is attested in the Nag Hammadi Library, and not by name, but by the seven vowels, for example. Now, I don't speak Welsh, so I can't speak with much authority on that. But her overland migration is attested by that sort of evidence, which I know sounds pretty wishy-washy. But again, we don't want to go into too much detail. It is in the book.
mm,
Brutus is much better documented, and but there was a huge amount of disentangling to do with him. It turns out he's far better attested in the British histories than I initially thought he was. It's just that his exploits have been wrongly attributed, and a whole fictional character has been created around Brutus's exploits. That is also gone into in the book. So you have to strip away, it's like stripping away old wallpaper. Here a door has been plastered up. Here a window has been boarded up. You've got to take all that down to see
mm.
what the original room looked like. And that's what I've tried to do.
What's coming across really, for me, is people who are interested in history and have had the same feeling with you that things aren't quite right,
Yeah.
and of course, so much has been lied to, or is a deception, or has been flowered in a different way. That's not a very good
Manipulated,
term. That
mangled,
any
warped.
mangled and as you say. What an interesting time for somebody who is just starting off a career in history and is thinking, actually, there's a lot here that I can get my heart and mind into and
Yes.
go off exploring.
No, absolutely. And I would go further and suggest some volumes to put on that bookshelf. And if you like, I can give you the lists of them and also links of where to find them, because our British history, which is also biblical, it needs its own little bookshelf. That's a very good idea, actually. I'll write that down.
Yeah, there you go. Okay,
And
so I mean, I think,
the
I mean,
volume.
this is, people going off into things and going, oh, it's just more of what I learnt at
Oh,
school and
but
I'm
it
going in
isn't.
debt.
It
But as you
really,
say,
really isn't.
and your enthusiasm and your passion is coming over for all of this. And if
Well,
anybody watching this, has students who are thinking about it, or daughters, sons, and what have you, are thinking about this, here is a huge area
yeah.
which we need people. I mean,
Yes.
clearly, we need
Yes.
people to be on the same passionate journey, uncovering stuff that has been either bulldozed or moved
Yes.
away because it's not convenient, and it doesn't tell the narrative.
No, that's put something very interesting into my mind. One of the people I'm going to be being interviewed by, Peter Chesborough, I think it was. No, Adam Griffith, beg his pardon, Adam Griffith, who decodes our stones with his
Mm,
father. Um, he actually wrote a thesis encouraged by his university on some aspects of our suppressed British history, which is not only very encouraging for our British history, but also very encouraging to know that there is a university out there somewhere. Can't remember which one it is. It might even have been Cardiff. Um, that is prepared to back this sort of research. And the more I talk to people like you and Adrian Gilbert, which is an enormous feather in my cap, even to be in contact with him after the blinding light of revelation that the Holy Kingdom gave me, the more I'm seeing that the younger generation are discarding what people of our age were taught by rote at school. And I
mm,
didn't do a history O level because it was so damn boring. Um, uh, um, there's a younger generation who are coming up with much more open minds. And my sort of book, The Holy Kingdom, the British Edda, the British Cymry, and all the old histories like the Brute of England, Cambria Triumphans, and Geoffrey of Monmouth, all these are ready and waiting for some up and coming people to begin to research properly, really properly detailed, and correlating. We need to correlate like mad. And
mm.
this is not my field. I just, as I say, I just try to provide a foundation of evidence for the fact that our British histories are actually a right and proper record. Okay, they're because they're so ancient, there's plenty that's been got wrong for all
Mm.
sorts of reasons. But that doesn't mean that we can drop the British histories
No, of
altogether.
course. No, absolutely. Well, listen, where can people find your book, The Great Migrations to Britain?
Well, it's available on my website,
Right?
and
And
it's also available through Watkins Books in London. I have a huge thanks to Mike Gilmore for putting me on his shelves, and it's available on the Britain's Hidden History website as well. So there are three choices. If you any of your viewers want to go and ask a bookshop to get, I'm also a publisher as well as a writer. Um, so if any of your viewers want to go and ask their bookshop to stock my books, tell the bookshop to get in touch with me and I'll see what I can do. I'm just a
right.
one-woman band. I have my other half, rather like you. Um, so yes, we're not hugely organized, but we can get the books out there.
Well, this is, I mean, I'm so much in favour of small, family-run,
Yes.
single people doing stuff rather than the big corporates as much as possible. So, what is your website address? I will put it in the description, but for those that want to write it down,
It's William Congreve, like the playwright,
yep,
dot co dot
dot
uk.
uk. Okay, brilliant. Listen, it's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your passion for history and igniting, I'm sure, other people to go and do some research for themselves because we all love doing that, finding out things, and,
Yes,
and, and you
yes.
feel so proud of yourself when you've got that little nugget that
You
nobody else
do.
knows,
Of
don't
course.
you?
And I want people to go and find out for themselves whether I'm right, what I've got right, what I could have done better in, what I've got wrong. Go and, as they say nowadays, go and do the research. Please go and do the research. This has been brilliant. Thank you so much for allowing me to give my book an airing and to give, more importantly, our British history the airing it deserves. It's
And
been
I
brilliant
think
time.
more and more people are beginning to realise that that is, this stuff that has not been dug up for whatever reason,
Yeah.
or the narrative is over here for whatever. People are so interested, I think,
Yes.
in what has been hidden or
Yes.
forgotten because
Yes.
it touches us here.
It does. Oh, it's who we are. It's just the folk memory thing again.
Yes.
Um, And I think the précis, actually, I don't know how we can make that available. Maybe I can. I'm not very tech-minded, but perhaps you with.
I can certainly post it in the description so people can read it
Oh,
as
yeah, that
well.
would be brilliant. Yes,
I
yes.
don't know how many characters they let me put in there, but I'll copy and paste as much as it, that will
Okay.
go.
And
So
I'll
it'll
see if I can
set them
find a
up.
way of putting it up as well. Thank you so
Yeah,
much. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
it's been wonderful, Marchell, to talk to you, and thank you for coming on and sparing the time.
My great pleasure. Thank you.
So, so there we are, ladies and gentlemen. Do check it out. The Great Migrations to Britain, 1527 BC, and it's great to see BC being used instead of these
Oh,
these
yes.
more recent. Well, I
Yes.
don't even know what they use now, but when I read it in a thing, I said, "Do you mean BC?
Yes.
Is that what you mean? Just write it because we know what you mean." And 485 BC. So
Yeah.
somebody like myself, who went to school in the 60s and 70s,
Yes.
with imperial measurements
Oh,
and
I'm
weights.
thoroughly imperial. Yes. Like the
Absolutely.
Earth, they're based on the Earth's measurements. The
Yes.
Nancy, yeah.
It's all it has me, and then when you realise these things have those meanings that relate to us and where we live
Yes.
instead of this artificial world, you realise, they've been pushing us down the wrong line for too
It's
long.
like we've been taken out of a frame. It's as though we've been taken out of a frame. This book puts the frame back round the picture, which is us.
Yes, exactly. So there we go. I'll be back with more wonderful interviews and amazing guests, and of course my daily monologue. But in the meantime, from Marchell and myself, take care and goodbye.